Self-taught programmers, we meet again. So I just want to have a very real and open and honest conversation about the state of the industry and breaking into this industry as a self-taught programmer. This has been something that's been very top of mind recently. I've had a lot of thoughts circling around my brain that I sort of just want to get out and I want to talk about. And I feel like I originally built my channel around this idea of becoming a self-taught programmer back in like 2021. And I grew a majority of my subscriber base by talking about non-traditional ways to break into this industry. But the industry has changed a lot since 2020, since I started making videos, and especially since 2016, once I first got my foot into the industry. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about breaking into the industry as a self-taught programmer in today's market. I think the best place to probably start with this video is talking about going from step zero, right? First learning how to code. I would think most people would agree that there's an infinite amount of resources out there on the internet that are completely free where you can learn how to code on your own to become competent enough to land a job in this market. And I don't think self-taught programmers are struggling with the lack of resources out there. I actually think it's the complete opposite. I think it's this information overload, this analysis of paralysis of not really knowing where to start or what to go deep on. For example, I was talking to someone the other day who talked about how they were learning the MERN stack. They felt very confident in the MERN stack. They were applying to jobs. They had been learning it for some time, but they felt like, for whatever reason, that they should pivot and learn another technology. And I think this sort of fits into this broader category of shiny object syndrome. And I don't think it's just a symptom that self-taught programmers have. I think it's a symptom that everyone in this industry has. But it's especially prevalent for people who are first learning how to code and trying to break into this industry, whether that's, learning how to code on their own means or maybe even new grads who've recently, learned computer science and they're trying to figure out what to establish themselves as. So here's my best piece of advice for people just in this situation in general. Most companies are looking for someone who can hit the ground running. Now, when we talk about big tech companies or maybe mid-sized companies, these are people that sort of cast a broader net. They just want people who have any experience, good amount of experience on their resume. And when you do interviews at these type of companies, you're going to be tested on your data structures and algorithms knowledge. But generally speaking, 70% of software development jobs aren't at these big tech or big name companies that run these kinds of interviews. Most job openings are openings that require someone to solve a very specific problem using a very specific tech stack. A lot of companies don't have the time or mental bandwidth to get someone up to speed with a certain tech stack. They want someone who has a pretty good understanding of it and can start effectively contributing almost immediately. Which is why I recommend when you're first learning how to code, spend that first 6 months to a year, maybe even 2 years, developing a deep domain expertise in one thing. Sort of take that thing that you enjoy doing, right? Maybe that's the MERN stack. Maybe it's something like native Android development. Maybe it's something like backend development with Python and Django. Whatever you find interest in, keep doing that one thing and keep doing it until you are really good at it. When you're first starting out, it is much better to be a master of one thing versus a jack of all trades. Because if you think about it like this, think about learning how to code, giving yourself a 6-month timeline, you'd be doing yourself a massive disservice if you started with something like front-end web development and then you transferred to like native Android development and then you switch to low-level C++ programming, right? You'd have a very broad understanding of a lot of different things and you wouldn't make yourself very marketable and your resume would be really confusing and really messy. You want to be known as that guy that can do that one thing well. For me, that's that guy who's good at mobile development. That's my brand on LinkedIn and on my resume, right? Mobile development. And that's why when I apply to specialized roles, I have a pretty good success rate of actually getting interviews. And I have a lot of recruiters reach out to me on LinkedIn for roles that are highly specialized in mobile development. Now, at some point, there does come a time where you need to branch out. And this is where I like to throw around the term, you should become a T-shaped developer. You should develop a deep domain expertise in one thing for maybe the first year, 2 years. And then this is where you're going to want to branch out into learning things like, backend, or learning things like mobile development, or whatever it is, right? Develop the elongated part of the T first, and then you develop the top. And this is really what companies ultimately are looking for when it comes to mid to senior level roles. They want someone who has a really good understanding of one thing, but can dive into different repositories or different pieces of the code base when necessary. So whether you're self-taught, maybe a new grad, this is my recommendation to you. Become really good at one thing. Now, another unfortunate reality of becoming a self-taught programmer is basic projects are no longer enough, right? Back when I was learning how to code, trying to break into this industry, not gonna lie, it's some really shitty projects, right? I don't even think I knew how to properly do object-oriented programming. Like, I had a very small, limited understanding of programming in general. I was just enthusiastic about it, and I had some things that I could talk about in the interview. Now, granted, I didn't get a very prestigious job as my first role. I literally got paid $12 an hour. I worked part-time while I was in college. I say I'm a self-taught programmer, but I actually started with community college. I transferred to university. I taught myself how to code on my own. I took a few computer science classes, but majority speaking, I taught myself how to code on my own, and then I dropped out when I got my first full-time role. Anyways, that was my first role, and I got it with a very limited understanding of programming. Nowadays, that is a much more unlikely scenario. That's probably not going to happen to you. And to really stand out and to showcase that you're a competent developer that knows what they're doing, you need to build standout projects, not just your cookie cutter projects, not just Twitter clones, not just comprehensive to-do lists. You should build something that is sort of full stack, end to end. It solves a real problem. And honestly, ideally, not only should you build something, you should start trying to think about or trying to build a brand around that product and maybe developing some sort of user base. That is going to significantly set you apart from the people who just aren't doing that. At some level, you kind of need to become an entrepreneur, right? You need to build these comprehensive projects. You should deploy them, make sure there's a live place people can view and interact and download them. You should be posting this project on your GitHub profile. You should have clear commit messages. You should have a clear README, and you should be building this brand around this product that you're building. And me just saying that sounds like a lot of fucking work. And to be honest, if I was trying to break into this industry today, I don't know if I would be capable of doing that. That sounds like something that's even a monumental task for myself. And the reality is, because it's such a monumental task, this is going to weed out 99% of people trying to get into this industry as a self-taught programmer. And I promise you, I'm not saying this to discourage anyone. If anything, I'm kind of saying it to, help you get a chip on your shoulder, maybe, prove me wrong to an extent. And also the path that I'm laying out might seem a little over the top. And the reality is some people might actually just learn how to code with, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, build a few websites for some local companies or local businesses in their hometown and land their first coding job. Like, I still hear of cases like that happening. The path that I'm laying out is the path that I'm the most confident that, if a self-taught programmer went down that path, they would actually be able to land a job and break into this industry. So that's really it. You have to build comprehensive projects, and then maybe you could explore things like freelancing or starting your own agency. Start an LLC where you can put it on your resume as a legitimate company that you were a software developer at, and build some projects, try to get some freelance work, whether that be through Upwork, whether that be through local networking. It doesn't matter how you get clients, as long as you're getting clients over a consistent time period. And this will also help you just kind of get real world experience building real software. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is giving yourself a realistic time frame to landing a job. I think a lot of people, especially people who are trying to break into this industry through non-traditional means, i.e. becoming a self-taught programmer, they approach it from this place of, they want to switch careers because perhaps they're in a predicament or a less than ideal financial situation. And they think maybe learning how to code could be the answer to solving their financial problems, right? So they say, okay, I'm going to learn how to code and it's going to take me 6 months. And in 6 months, I'll have a job where I'm making 70, 80K a year. I'm working remotely and it's providing a lot more comfortability for my life. And generally speaking, those are really good things to consider. You absolutely should be worried about those things, and it's good that you're thinking about them. The only thing that you should be cautious about is giving yourself a strict timeline, right? If you beat yourself up to the point where you say, I better learn how to code in 6 months and land a job, if that doesn't happen in 6 months, you're going to feel very defeated. And you might honestly end up quitting too, even though if you were to spend maybe another 3 months or 4 months, sticking to that thing, you would have a very real chance of actually breaking into this industry. So all I'm saying is just be kind to yourself. Give yourself a realistic timeline. Honestly, if you can, try not to give yourself a timeline at all. Just make the agreement to yourself, I'm going to learn how to code, I'm going to build comprehensive projects, and I'm going to give it my best shot over a long enough period of time to break into this industry. Also, it's important to understand that it's not always in your best interest to have a 1-year plan, right? There's this idea in programming, right? In agile programming, where you only plan enough into the future because the understanding is you're going to learn more about the product, and naturally the product's going to evolve, and the longer term vision you have for that product is going to significantly change in a matter of 4 months. So at some level, it doesn't even make sense to think past a year. And I think the advice or the sentiment behind that is totally true to your life. You oftentimes have this starting point, right? Whether that's like learning something like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, you have this starting point, and people try to think a year in advance, like, okay, what am I doing for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 months down the line? And that can be such an overwhelming thing. And I would say that generally speaking, as long as you're taking action on the most immediate and apparent thing in your life, your path is absolutely going to unfold as you go. Maybe you can only see 2 steps ahead. You want to get to step 10. Maybe you can only see step 2, 3. But once you get to step 3, then you'll be able to see step 4, step 5, step 6, so on and so forth. So the most important thing you could do is just take action, get the ball rolling, let the path unfold itself, because I promise you, it always does. Okay, so now let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is LLMs and AI. Are LLMs really good at writing code that junior developers typically write? The answer is yes, and they are probably better than you, and they're probably going to be better than you throughout your journey learning how to code. And I think this is why so many new programmers are becoming so discouraged, because they learn how to build a basic website with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. They hook up a few button interactions. It does some cool animation. And then they realize that they spent 2 weeks learning how to do that thing when AI could do it in seconds. And that is the truth. AI is really good at those beginner level problems. And not only that, AI is really good at any task when it works in isolation. So maybe it's an evergreen project or evergreen problem. AI is really good at building stuff from the ground up. But where AI starts to crumble, and you'll just have to trust me on this one, but if you asked any experienced software engineer, they will say the exact same thing, is when you start trying to use it to generate code for complex systems that have very complicated business logic. All right, and it has to reason through all the different nuances of this business logic. And the code that you're writing now interacts with 20 different services or all these different components, right? And you're using AI to write code in code bases that have hundreds of thousands of lines of code and thousands of different files. And all these files sort of interact with each other in different ways. That's where it really starts to fall apart. And this idea of, oh, AI can do the job of 5 entry-level programmers, what's even the point? Is something that I sort of understand, but also too, I don't really understand, because yes, maybe AI will get to the point where it can do the job of 5 entry-level programmers, and maybe you only need 1 entry-level programmer to do the equivalent amount of work. But the reality is, especially in this hyper-competitive capitalist landscape that we live in, companies are going to want to move as fast as possible, right? So is a company going to hire a single dev, right? And let that dev use AI and have it have the same output as 5 junior engineers? Or just hire the 5 junior engineers that they were going to hire in the first place and 5x the result of company A over here, right? These are things that you have to think about. And another thing to think about is if AI is coming for programmers, it's coming for everything. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is this idea of holding yourself accountable, right? If you are gung-ho on the idea of learning how to code and breaking into this industry through non-traditional means, then you have to have a very real and honest conversation with yourself and ask yourself the question, can I hold myself accountable for a long enough time frame to give me the best chance of landing a job? And if the answer is no, guess what? That's okay. People crave structure. People want deadlines. People want to be told what to do. It's so much easier to do that, right? So if the answer is genuinely no, maybe you should start considering other options, like going back to college, a coding bootcamp, or maybe even hiring a mentor. And this is where I'm going to shamelessly plug my mentorship. And I'm not saying this is the answer to your solution, but I currently run a mentorship program. I do it with 2 other software engineers that I'm pretty good friends with, Kevin Naughton Jr., an ex-big tech software engineer, and Tech with Tim, an ex-Microsoft engineer, huge coding YouTuber. You've probably heard of him. Essentially, what we do is, what we work with our students on is helping them come up with that defined roadmap, right? That defined plan that they can sort of work towards over the duration of our program, which is 4 months. So how we do it is we have a strategy call with you where we dissect your current situation. From there, behind the scenes, we all collaborate together and create this comprehensive 4-month plan that you tackle as you go throughout the duration of the program. And then throughout the 4 months, you're in constant communication and contact with us. We make sure that you are, 1, being held accountable. You're doing the things that you said that you would do and that we told you to do. And 2, we're there to give you pieces of advice, nudge you in the right direction, and help you out on your learning journey. The goal is to help you become a job-ready and confident software engineer. So if that sounds interesting to you, click the link in the description, book a call, and we will see if you are a good fit. Now, mentorship aside, mentorship isn't for everyone. There is the other options of going back to college or maybe going to a coding bootcamp. Now, I want to be very cautious and not recommend you go back to college and spend $100,000 to get a computer science degree. However, I think there are smart ways you can sort of approach this. And I think the smartest way to approach going back to college is starting with something like community college. Like I've mentioned, that's exactly what I started with. I started with community college. I transferred to university before I dropped out, and I found community college to be a phenomenal experience. I actually found it to be much better than the traditional university experience that I had for a year. The classes were much smaller, they were much more intimate, and it felt like the professors at community college actually cared about my growth and wanted me to do well, and they wanted me to succeed. And it was at a fraction of the cost, right? And this is a really common path that a lot of people do. They go to community college for 2 years, and then they spend 2 years at university, and they only pay for tuition at that university for 2 years. But not only that, a lot of community colleges offer programs that are more 3-in-1, right? So you could spend literally 3 years at community college, transfer to a well-known established university, and only pay a single year's worth of tuition. Not only that, you can consider options like Western Governors University, where they offer computer science degrees at an expedited rate. Essentially, the program is, as long as you're able to move through the curriculum at your own pace, and as long as you complete all your assignments, you pass all the tests, you could theoretically finish your 4-year degree in something like 2 years. Now, I don't know a ton about that program. You're going to have to do your own investigative research on that, but that is a possible option that you could pursue. Another option is a coding bootcamp. And if the choice falls between you really wanting to learn how to code, but you can't hold yourself accountable, you don't really know where to start, and end up ultimately just giving up, versus signing up for a coding bootcamp, maybe spending, 10, 15K, learning how to code, coming out a much more confident engineer with a longer term career path, I think this is certainly your best option. Not saying that you will be guaranteed a job if you go to a coding bootcamp, but it should put you up on a very clear path of what to learn, how to learn, and sort of where to go after the coding bootcamp. I've worked with so many coding bootcamp grads throughout my career, and I think it's sort of mostly just a nature of the type of companies that I've worked for. They tend to be smaller tech companies, but I would say like 50% of the people that I've worked with actually graduated from a coding bootcamp. And guess what? They're very competent. They're very valuable engineers. I feel like coding bootcamps get a lot of unnecessary hate, but I think if you find a good one, it can certainly set you up for massive career success. Again, not saying it's a solution for everyone, but it is a possibility that you could explore. And for the final bit of advice, and probably the most important thing that you could take away from this video, if you are gung-ho about learning how to code on your own, you want to break into this industry as a self-taught programmer, the best leverage that you can have is through your network. And I think a lot of people sort of misconstrue this idea of networking. They think it means you have to, go to events in a suit and tie and shake someone's hand and give them your resume, right? But that is totally not the case. I think my definition of networking is a lot different than other people's definition of networking. My definition of networking is a lot more loose. I think networking is mostly just a matter of being friendly, putting yourself out there on, LinkedIn, connecting with random people, shooting them a message, connecting with people on Twitter, going to meetups in real life where you're meeting other software developers and you're meeting other recruiters, right? Just be an open, friendly person and make connections that way. I think tech conferences are a great way to network. Now, I've only been to a handful of tech conferences in my life, but every time I've went to one, it's been a very positive experience where I've met a lot of software engineers. I've actually collected emails, I've met recruiters, and I've had recruiters email me for job postings. Matter of fact, my last full-time software development job I got because I went to a tech conference, I networked with a recruiter, and after applying to one of their openings, the recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, I remember you from that tech conference." And that just opened the door up for conversation and helped me get my foot in the door to actually interview at that company. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Use networking to your advantage. Regardless if you're a self-taught programmer or not, it will go a long way in your career. So anyways, thank you so much for watching the video. I know it was a long one, so I appreciate you sticking around this long, and I will see you all in the next one.